Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 11 of Two Cooks Talking. I am one of your hosts, Long Nguyen. I am not an expert on cooking, but I do enjoy food. With me, as usual, is Executive Chef Michael Weller, who is an expert on cooking.
How you doing this night?
Doing all right. It is a cold night tonight, and just around the corner is, in the states here, we celebrate Christmas predominantly. Most of us celebrate Christmas. I'm not even Christian, and I celebrate Christmas. So, so I figured that tonight would actually be a great night to talk about Christmas foods.
Fantastic. I love food.
Yeah.
I love Christmas.
Yeah, and yeah, I love Christmas too. Just sitting around a nice warm fire, roasting things in that fireplace. Maybe have Die Hard on TV. It's a great holiday.
Well, you can put any movie you want on. I guess it's Christmas, but typically in our home,
Yeah.
our tradition is to watch Grinch.
Okay.
How the Grinch, and not the silly Carrie version, the original animated. But that's an entirely different podcast
Yeah.
that we can get into later.
I just felt like throwing that at you real quick. Okay, so let's talk Christmas. I think typically what I see, typically I have in my home for Christmas is the main part of the main dish is a ham.
There we go.
Yeah, I think typically most people see hams for Christmas.
Lots of different traditions
Yeah.
at Christmas time. My ancestors on my mother's side are British,
Mm.
and I haven't done a Christmas goose, but that's a very strong tradition coming from that cultural bent.
Hmm.
I'm not a big fan of goose, and I've cooked goose for other events, and I don't particularly like it. It's the only meat I know of that's greasy and dry at the same time. But that is another strong tradition. There's a pretty strong tradition for beef cookery at Christmas as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and there are the non-traditionalists who do a turkey, but I don't know. We have kind of idiosyncratic traditions in my family.
Oh,
So
really? What do you have planned?
Christmas Eve is always red beef enchiladas.
Red beef
Yeah,
enchiladas.
enchiladas with a red sauce,
Hmm.
and not a red and green sauce, which would be appropriate,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You have options right there.
No, but it's long, slow cooked chuck roast. The meat shredded and stuffed into tortillas and covered in a nice sauce, and it's just a very convenient meal on Christmas Eve.
Oh, yeah. I've never really heard of that one for Christmas.
I said idiosyncratic.
Yeah.
And it kind of developed over time in my family as something that we could put on. Typically, Christmas Eve tends to be a busy day,
Hmm.
and then that evening sitting around the fire, it's a no stress meal because it's already made.
Nice. Yeah, I typically don't really have for Christmas Eve. For Christmas Eve, I never really have plans. It's kind of whatever we have around the house because it's Christmas Day is where the good eats are in our house. Um, do you typically make a big meal for Christmas Day?
Christmas Day varies. For many many years, it's my sister has claimed that as her holiday, and we
Okay.
have a big pork roast and some other dishes like a pork loin roast,
Mm.
and because it's traditional and because it began with my mom and dad, it's really well cooked pork.
Okay.
But it's tender and fall apart delicious, and
Nice.
we typically serve it with about equal weight of onions that are in the pan for as long as the pork is, and
Mm,
they soak up the pork juices,
that
and
sounds great.
it's good food.
Yeah, yeah. Usually we just get some sort of honey baked ham, spiral cut, and the great thing about that is
It's done.
it's done, and you got meals for days.
Yeah, yeah, and when all the meals are done, you've got a great soup.
Yeah. Let's take a left turn from food and let's talk about eggnog. Eggnog is a big traditional Christmas treat. I see a big gleeful smile on your face. I enjoy eggnog. I know you in particular have a tradition about eggnog when it comes to the holidays.
Yeah, it stems from my dad, who didn't believe in celebrating Christmas until after Thanksgiving in any way, and that kind of developed in my own family. My wife and my son are eggnog fanatics; they are freaks about eggnog, and it's become our tradition that you cannot have eggnog until the day after Thanksgiving. Black Friday is the beginning of eggnog season. Um, and my teenage son can drink more eggnog than you can even imagine. We did a gallon and a half on Black Friday this year,
Holy cow.
and it was mostly my son with, I don't know, my wife chips in and she adds nutmeg. I love fresh nutmeg, and we grate fresh nutmeg over the top of the eggnog, and occasionally we spike it for my wife. My son's not quite there yet, but
What's your go-to spike?
ooh,
Typically, I see brandy.
brandy is probably classic,
Yeah,
but I was raised in a bourbon home.
I'm a bourbon guy.
Yeah,
So yeah,
and so just because it's more likely to be there,
right.
it's going to be bourbon.
Yeah. So
Yep.
yeah, usually I do bourbon for myself. If I don't feel like doing myself, I'll get that Pennsylvania Dutch, which is usually a mix of I think brandy and cognac, which are kind of the same thing. So
The French would argue with you, but yeah, it's the exact same thing. Yeah, we have in in my career, I've done a lot of interesting things. There's a very large Catholic tradition on Christmas Eve of serving seafood. Typically, course after course of seafood on Christmas Eve, and I love that as a tradition. But because I always celebrate Christmas, typically with my parents and my sister, and it was that element of the family. My sister hates seafood, so
nah,
I never did that at home, but I've done it professionally, and I love the Italian tradition of seven seas and just course after course of beautiful seafood on Christmas Eve.
nice.
Um,
Yeah.
Hugely popular Christmas tradition in the United States.
Yeah, I'm not. I wasn't even aware about that. I think just being from like a southern state, or even like just kind of that uh, not necessarily Midwestern, but kind of Midwestern homestyle cooking and southern cooking. You don't really see much fish on the.
My wife jokes about being raised, and for her, Catholic meant tater tots on Friday, and with fish sticks and tater tots. And it was an access problem. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't think people eat enough seafood, but I go to the supermarkets and I can't blame them.
yeah.
Right? Seafood is incredible when it's fresh,
Mhm.
and it goes bad really fast.
Yeah.
And you can't blame people in the middle of the country where the access is more limited from not eating enough seafood. And I live on the coast, right out. San Francisco's the height of seafood, and we have a hard time getting high quality seafood here.
Yeah, I was talking with a coworker the other day, and he said for Thanksgiving, he's from the Bay Area. For Thanksgiving, they every year they do a cioppino for Thanksgiving, which is such a San Francisco thing to do.
I've done it more often for New Year's Eve,
Yeah,
or Christmas,
yeah,
but yeah, Chipino is San Francisco. And
yeah,
wow,
yeah. Uh,
there are.
for those that don't know, cioppino is kind of like the kind of a scrap soup of seafood.
It began the same way, and Lydia Bastianich has a TV show, and I generally like her. She's got a good heart,
Mhm.
but she did a whole season of traveling the United States and doing Italian American food,
Mm.
and she made a cioppino when she was in San Francisco. That she said, and it's just the same as the Italian soup. And that's because you didn't make cioppino, lady. So cioppino is a fisherman's stew, right?
Yeah.
The same around the world. They're similar in all cultures that have fishermen. They come back and they sell the expensive cuts for money,
Mhm.
and all the bony fish, the little fish that are left that don't sell for much money, that's what the fisherman eats, right?
Mhm.
So in California, it means cioppino means wine. It means amazing California wine. It means
Mhm.
delicious seafood, and it has to include crab because West Coast crab is Dungeness crab, and I have long-standing battles with people from around the country. Blue crab or whatever you want to eat in other places. Dungeness crab is the best crab in the world, and it has to go into Tofino. So it's an Italian American dish of seafood and tomatoes and wine and crab.
Mm.
In San Francisco, they'll serve you a bib with it, and it's really not that bad of an idea because it's two elbows on the table food.
Yeah.
It's dig in and pick out the crab meat, and I love Tofino.
All right, so we took a little diversion there, but I think it's great for anybody to learn about that type of new foods, especially food that isn't uh, popular or well known elsewhere. I did want to take a step back real quick because we were talking about eggnog. People are aware of eggnog. They buy it, they drink it. What is eggnog?
It's a combination of dairy and eggs. It's very rich. It's darn near a pourable custard.
Mm.
It's a thickened dairy product with eggs,
Mm.
and it's as rich as all get out. And it's seasoned with what you might call Christmas spices, right? So you get nutmeg and cinnamon and those spices we associate with the Christmas season.
Right.
And I've made it from scratch.
Mm.
Given my son, it's difficult to keep up with him doing it that way. But and it's delicious. Your mother-in-law makes
Mm.
a eggnog jello that's
Yeah, it's
fabulous.
pretty good.
Yeah, it's a great flavor profile, and
Yeah.
and what I like about holding off until the day after Thanksgiving is it keeps it special,
Mhm.
right? I can make eggnog in July, but this tradition means eggnog is what you think of when the holidays roll around. So
Yeah, I wonder if that makes it that much more of a desirable resource for in your family, just because you save it for that,
it has to be.
26 days
It's
or whatever.
supply and demand. You can have it from the day after Thanksgiving until it runs off the shelves
Mm.
at the stores. And typically towards the end of the season, there's some searching that goes on,
Yeah.
and who's got some left, and just to try and extend it. But yeah, you limit it, and it becomes more special automatically. So
Um, what else about Christmas? Another thing that comes to mind is figgy pudding. It's in a song.
and it's a steamed Christmas
Yeah.
pudding, figgy pudding, steamed desserts, originally part of the British culinary heritage.
Hmm.
Um, and for all the bad knocks that traditional British food gets, and some of them are deserved, the big, heavy, rich steamed puddings and Christmas puddings are fantastic.
Yeah.
And I recently found out that you and I share an unusual trait.
Okay.
We're both fans of fruitcake.
Oh yeah, I love fruitcake.
I do too.
Something about the flavor and the spice and the nuts and the textural contrast. Just a big fan of fruitcake.
Yeah, I've got so a small batch have been working. I started it in November. I've been
Hmm.
soaking it about every week in rum.
Nice. I was about to ask, do you put booze in it?
Oh yeah, yeah. This year, in fact, we're calling it Crocken Cake because
Oh,
I'm
you
buying.
with
I
the
bought a
Kraken rum.
particular rum, and so we're having Crocken Cake for the holidays.
Yeah. Nice.
I love the fruits, the texture, and the seasoning is just it's an amazing combination. I don't understand why people don't like fruitcake.
I think it's just the it comes in a tin, right? That's what people
It can, yeah.
or it comes in a plastic bag. Here's a cake in a plastic bag. So I think it just freaks people out. But I don't think anybody, if people give fruitcake a chance, I think they'll enjoy it.
Some of the dried fruits that are in a traditional mix
So
are
what you're looking at, like dates or
yeah. So dates, citron, orange peel, candied orange or citrus peel,
that all sounds
cherries.
great.
It's, I mean, how can you not like this?
Yeah.
Unless it's really badly done,
Yeah.
and it could be that people have experienced badly done fruitcakes.
Hmm.
And yeah, it should weigh way more than you would expect looking at it. It should be dense and heavy with flavor.
Yeah.
But there you go.
I think for me in particular, I think one thing that gives an advantage is that I like extra moist cakes. I know some people don't like the word moist, but I like extra moist cakes.
Hmm.
So like a fruit cake just be a little extra moist. Tres leches is like one of my favorite cakes, and that is all moist.
That might peg out the top of the scale right there. I
Yeah.
love tres
Yeah.
leches. It's a wonderful cake.
Yeah.
Um,
So, you're looking at those dried fruits. Um, you're looking at what kind of nuts do you use, like walnuts and.
Fan of walnuts. I
Mm,
really like walnuts in this particular dessert. I
mm,
come from my own individual family is a pistachio family,
mm.
but I like walnuts in a fruit cake.
I feel like pistachio it's got too much of a flavor. Like the walnuts, I think is a lot more neutral to me, and it's got a nice crunch. And
Walnuts have a great crunch, and they
yeah,
have tannin.
yeah,
They have a refreshing flavor to pair or contrast with all the
right,
fruitcake is sweet.
yeah.
I mean, it's incredibly sweet and dense and rich. So
Mm,
I like kind of what the tannins in a walnut does.
mm. And then for the seasonings, the typical Christmas spices there.
Clove and nutmeg and cinnamon and all those delicious tropical spices that mean Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think a big part about Christmas, because we're going to go on about this a bit. It sounds like is that desserts are sweets are a big part of Christmas.
Hmm.
Um, so we were talking about figgy pudding. I've only recently had figgy pudding. I think I had it, well, not recently. It was about like maybe 8 or 9 years ago. I've only had it once. My dear aunt-in-law Carol, she made it. I think back then my palate probably isn't as sophisticated as it is now, where I thought it was incredibly bitter back then, which is I think I've gotten better at it, and so I think I want to give it another shot. But yeah, she's British, and so we just had a fun little Boxing Day dinner, and then
There you go.
and had some figgy pudding. Um, we talked about eggnog. We talked about fruitcake. There's things like sugar cookies are very common,
Hmm.
easy to decorate. I
Yep.
think that's probably one of the main reasons sugar cookies and any sort of flat cookie, right?
Right. Huge tradition of cookie making. In my family, it's snickerdoodles and what my mom called ranger cookies,
Hmm.
and always at Christmas, the Christmas fudge. Um, and I think one of the reasons cookies are a tradition tied to Christmas is the idea that at Christmas time you get visitors.
Right.
People drop by, and it's easy to put out a platter of cookies.
And you go to the office, you have little bags of cookies to hand to
Right.
people. It's a lot easier than coming there with a big sheet of cake or something like that.
Now, kind of on that same principle, one of the things I tend to do around Christmas time is have things in the fridge that I can pull out at a moment's notice.
Mm.
I haven't done rillettes yet this year, but that's one of my favorite things to make. A rillette is a long, slow cooked meat that's packed in its own fat. And as delicious as that sounds, please do check with your doctor if you're going to listen to our podcast too much. But yeah, I take a pork shoulder and I cook it down and I pack it in pork fat. And then you put it on a piece of crusty bread as a spread. And it's got the advantage of being able to sit in the, it's a way of preserving pork originally. So it can sit in the fridge for weeks. And then company comes over and you pull out a little crock of rillettes. And it's just a nice little touch.
Now, going on another diverging tangent. I want to talk about terminology real quick. So, talking about rillettes, and it sounds similar because I don't really know what it is to like confit, because confit is typically something cooked in its own fat as well.
So they're both techniques that go back to when you would have an abundance of game in the fall.
Hmm.
So confit began in France when the migratory ducks would come by. You could kill 100 of them,
Hmm.
but there's no sense in killing 100 ducks if you can only eat 17 before they go bad,
Right.
right? You don't have refrigeration. So confit is a technique where duck is slowly cooked in its own fat.
Mm.
It's rubbed in salt and seasonings to pull out moisture, and then it's slowly cooked in fat, and then left in its own fat so the fat hermetically seals the meat.
Okay.
No oxygen get to it. You bury a crock of confit in a cool part of the yard. It stays relatively safe. I recommend refrigerators now. We have them. But in addition to preserving the meat, it's screaming
Yeah.
delicious. You know, it's fat carries flavor, so you can make duck rillettes the same way as you make pork rillettes. So the only difference between a confit and a rillette is rillettes are typically cooked in much the same way and then shredded into their own fat. Duck confit is cooked in the same way and kept whole, so duck legs are kept whole in their own fat.
Okay.
But they're both really similar.
Okay.
Really delicious.
Yeah, it sounded similar, so I just wanted to be sure that we get that clarified a bit.
And both of them have the advantage during the holidays of being something that you can just pull out of the fridge and have.
Yeah.
So,
What else do you have around the house?
this year, I will have over the course of the holidays. I'm bringing in some foie gras.
Ooh,
Um,
bringing in. It's legal in California now.
It is legal, but I bought the foie gras as a foie gras pate instead of making the pate myself. Save myself a little bit of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're going to have foie gras again, something to put out for special.
I love foie gras. Just like a little bit of that and on some like water crackers or table crackers. It's delicious.
It's we can get into a very long discussion on foie gras because it's certainly a
It's
controversial
controversial.
ingredient.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have it for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Years ago, I have a dear, wonderful cousin who I love and respect deeply, but she's a card-carrying member of People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. And when Shane was 4, his favorite food was foie gras. And she came unglued when she found out that a poor innocent 4-year-old had been exposed to foie gras and thought it was the best food in the world. Well, he's 17 years old now and makes up his own mind, and he still loves foie gras.
Oh, yeah, it's one of my favorite things to eat by far.
So again, the idea is something you have in the fridge and take out at a moment's notice. I'm making on the other end of the kind of fancy food scale. I'm going to have a very nice chicken liver pate in the fridge to take out just at a moment's notice. So between that, my wife's cookies, typically we do more baking at Christmas. It's a weather thing, right?
Yeah.
So baked bread, focaccia or our family bread.
Right.
You and I both married into a family that had a bread.
Yeah.
And I think all of the women in the family we married into make this bread.
My wife, she's tried it a couple of times, but she's not as confident with mom nearby. So
You moved to California so she wouldn't have to.
yeah. And yes, your wife makes great focaccia. It's one of my. I enjoy that a lot.
Yeah, it's just part of the tradition. You want the house to smell like that. That's part of the welcoming aspect of what Christmas means.
Yeah, and I think that's why the sweets are so popular because when you walk into a house and you smell the nutmeg and the cinnamon and the clove and everything cooking, it just smells like warmth and childhood to me.
Right. And this idea of childhood joy and sharing with others, that's key. It is a key element of Christmas. And it's what makes a Christmas movie a Christmas movie. Just to bring it around.
All right. Was there anything else about Christmas that comes to mind?
Well, check in with us. We'll be doing podcasts throughout the season.
Yeah.
We've got Christmas, and that leads us right into New Year's.
Yeah. So
and
I think next episode we'll do a New Year's episode, and then I think call 2016 a
done.
night. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's been a rough 2016 for most people. So, but I think that does it for Christmas. I've been Long Nguyen.
And I'm Mike Weller.
And you can subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes at Two Cooks Talking. That's the number 2 Cooks Talking. You can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Two Cooks Talking. You can email us at twoCooksTalking@gmail.com. You can listen to our old podcast at twoCooksTalking.podbean.com. And I think that covers all the plugs. And I guess until next time, Merry Christmas.
Exactly.